Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar on cast iron piping repair or replace. This show is produced by the National Building Expert, and the title is Ask the Building Expert, which is a whole webinar series on construction and building issues. By the way, if you have any topic you want covered, let us know and we'll be happy to uh, consider it, and hopefully you can see that topic on a future webinar. We have webinars actually planned out through the end of this year and also next year. And if it's important, uh, top of mind webinar, we can always change the schedule. That's, we're easy to work with. And my name is Lance Duke. I'm a construction engineer. I'm actually the national building expert. I do all kinds of stuff, hang from 40-story buildings, do inspections and things like that. At this time, I'd like to introduce Martin Pea, who's the back-end host. He's the IT guy. He's going to be here during the duration of the webinar. So if we have any problems, he'll be able to fix it. If you need coffee or pastries or whatever, send him an email and he can send you a photo of whatever you order. Okay, because we're online. As I mentioned, Ask the Building Expert. These webinars are actually designed to help building owners, homeowners, association, unit owners, property managers, and contractors, developers, and whoever else. If you're looking at the photos, the photo on the left is me in San Francisco inspecting the Millennium Tower, which is leaning. And I think they're trying to plan or fixing the building right now. I haven't kept track of what's going on. So as I mentioned, the topic is cast iron drain piping. And here we go. This is going to be fun. So there's trouble in paradise. How much trouble are we actually in? Well, I'm not talking about the pandemic and how this COVID-19 affected Hawaii, and it really did. Our economy kind of went down the toilet because nobody could come to Hawaii, and the tourist industry really took a big hit. But speaking of toilets, that's the subject matter, at least part of it, as we talk about cast iron piping. So in Hawaii and in different areas of the United States, especially, thousands of buildings were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the piping that was used for plumbing, venting, waste piping uh, were cast iron piping. And cast iron piping is actually a metal pipe as opposed to a plastic or clay pipe. And the useful life, believe it or not, of cast iron piping is 35 to 40 years. So if you do the math, if your building or house was built in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, and it has cast iron piping, guess what? Your piping is old, it's beyond the useful life. Now, people didn't really realize this, but when developers built these high-rise buildings, it was kind of a commonly known myth. I wouldn't say fact, it was a myth because people thought that the building was going to last 100 years or longer, and the cast iron piping was going to last 80, 100 years or more. But that's not true, because over time we've done studies and investigations and inspections of buildings that were 35 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, and the cast iron piping was failing or failed, and there were all kind of leaks. Now, um, the cast iron piping material was made not only in the United States, but it was also made in Mexico, India, Korea, and China. And there was different material used and different quality of materials. So I won't say which was better and which wasn't, but even piping in the US was failing because it's not a lifetime material. It's not going to last 100 years. And let me clarify, when I say cast iron piping, I'm talking about DWV. And what does that stand for? D is drain, which is regular water or rainwater. Uh, W is waste, such as if you flush your toilet, that's going down a waste pipe. And then V is vent, that's a vent pipe. So anytime you have a waste pipe or a drain pipe, there should be a vent pipe to go with it to let air in to balance the flow. Okay. So the topic is Nightmare on King Street. Well, remember that old scary movie, Nightmare on Elm Street? Okay, so this is my story on the Nightmare on King Street. There was a project, 40-story building on King Street. And what happened was they had leaks every month, and there was a trickle down effect. And what that means is if you're on the 38th floor and the pipe leaks, guess what? It's going to trickle down. And maybe trickle is not the right term. Maybe it's flood down, and it goes down every floor until the problem is stopped. So one pipe leak could affect 20 units in the building or even more. And if you look at this photo, this is of a lateral drain pipe. A lateral is a horizontal pipe, and you see all the holes in it. Now, guess what? The holes you see were on top of the pipe, so there was no leak here. Now, if the pipe was turned around where the holes were on the bottom, that's a guaranteed leak. So it was interesting how this happened. So the Nightmare on King Street project, there were multiple units with water damage and mold, and every month they had a claim, and their insurance was on the verge of being canceled, or if they didn't cancel, there was $150 deductible. And what that meant was if there was any claim in the future for a water infiltration problem due to a pipe leak, they would have to first pay the first $150,000 before their insurance kicked in. So this is something major. And you're talking about a high-rise building that's worth, valued at multi-million dollars. Excuse me. So it's very important that the problem be addressed, right? So I got called and they said, hey, we need help. We have every month we have a pipe leak and we don't know what to do. Uh, we're going ahead and spending $20,000, $30,000 per unit to fix the piping, but then the next month the same thing happens. So we have to figure out something. And I told them, yeah, I can help you plan this whole thing out. What you need is stop fixing each unit. You need to fix the whole building. And that was the start of working on the entire plumbing project, which we'll get into later on during this webinar. Now, how do we determine if your piping is bad or not? Okay, one method is if you called me up and said, hey, Lance, I live in this building and it's 60 years old. Do you think my cast iron piping is bad? I would say yes, because it's way past the expected life. The cast iron piping doesn't last forever. It doesn't last 100 years, 80 years, and you're lucky that it's even lasted this long. So that's one method. That's not too scientific, but then we'll go to the next method. I asked, how many leaks have you had in the building over the past year, 2 years, and what was the cause of the leaks? And then the next question is, what's the number of insurance claims that you've gotten? And it didn't matter whether it was common area pipe or whether it was a unit owned pipe. It's the same problem, meaning it's the same leak. Okay. And really, at that point, it really doesn't matter who's at fault, because if you're a unit owner in a condo and you go, well, my pipe leaked, then they said it was my own pipe, not the building pipe. Okay, well, it's still a leak, right? Other inspection and analysis methods is scoping. What we do is get a plumbing contractor to run a video camera down the drain line, and we look at the inside of the pipe. And a lot of times when we do that, we can't even get that uh, scoping line in there because it's too clogged. Okay, so that's a red flag already. The other method is an ultrasound, where it's sort of like a ultrasound for a human, but we know what the pipe size diameter is, and the thickness of the pipe. So we extrapolate. What we do is we say the pipe thickness brand new is so many millimeters. Now, when we do the ultrasound, we can determine what the millimeter of the metal is and the percentage of degradation. And then we can kind of extrapolate and say, well, this pipe is going to last a couple more years, or you know what, it's just too far gone already. So ultrasound is another method. The best method is to actually go in and remove the pipe and do a physical inspection. Okay, that's where it's undeniable that it's a problem, because sometimes we have to gather all the information, and there's unit owners in a condo who say, well, we don't think that our pipe's bad. I never had a leak. But then when we present the actual samples and say, look, here's the corroded pipe, here's a cracked pipe. And they're going to say, well, yeah, but that came from one of your other projects, not our building. And I said, no, this came from your building. We did testing and took out sections of pipe. How do we plan a piping project? So let's say it's determined that your piping is old and we need to replace it. So let's talk about the steps of how to plan this entire project. First, you hire a construction manager and a mechanical engineer. And the construction manager would be hired, the first person that gets hired, because he's the symphony conductor. He would determine what the next steps are. And the next step would be, well, we need to redo the piping and we need to hire a mechanical engineer. Well, why? Because the engineer has to draw plans and stamp the plans so we can submit the plans to get a building permit. Okay. The other thing was you look at the original plans, and hopefully the building has the original plans, and we want to review the piping diagram, the layout, and see where all the pipes are in the building so we can better determine how we're going to go into these areas and replace the piping. The other step is we have to test for hazardous materials. So if the building is built in the 60s or 70s, there's a chance that there may be asbestos on the flooring, the mastic, the floor material, those 9x9 floor tiles, those old tiles. There could be lead paint on the walls. There could be asbestos material in the walls. They use drywall and, the joint compound they use to seal the joint tape before they plaster the wall. That could be asbestos containing. So we cannot just go in there and cut the wall open to look at the pipe. We have to make sure that we test the materials first. Now, what other things do we do to plan a piping project? Okay, the case of, well, how much is all this going to cost? So what we do is we obtain preliminary contractor estimates. In other words, before we even have any new plans drawn, we supply a contractor with the old plans and take them through the building and say, here's where the piping is. You can see where the bathroom is, where the kitchen is, where the laundry is. And we want your best guess estimate of a range of X amount to X amount of dollars. And because we need to get back to the owner or the condo board and say, here's what it's going to cost. And do you have that money? And in most cases, they go, of course not. We never budgeted for this. We didn't even know we had a problem. Okay, so that's information gathering. The other step would be to have the mechanical engineer complete the plans and specs, and then communication with the owner, building owner, or if it's a condo, with the condo board to let the board know what's going on, what the plan is. Now, when we talk about completing the plans and specs, that may not only be with the mechanical engineer. There are situations where we would need to hire a structural engineer, we would need to hire a civil engineer, and we may need to hire an architect or other engineers. That's because there's so many moving parts. And why do we need to hire a structural engineer? Well, there's situations where we'll be coring through concrete walls, floors, and making big holes, and we don't want to do too much damage. So we may need the engineer to kind of let us know what was a safe way to get things done. Okay. Now let's say that we decided to have the project completed. Now, the pipe replacement protocol is the next step that we're going to be discussing. And when I say we, I'm referring to me as a construction manager that was hired by a building owner of an office building or a condo association. And I'm acting as a capacity of the construction manager. So I'm setting the replacement protocol in place. So, and this applies whether it's a high-rise building, a townhouse building, or whether it's your own house that you live in or it's a rental. Okay, if you have cast iron piping issues, then you basically follow this format. Now, the number one is you obtain a building permit because the work is falls under the requirement of needing a building permit. The other thing is you notify the owners or occupants. So I deal with high-rise buildings all the time and townhouses. So we need to let the occupants know what's going on. And it doesn't matter whether it's a owner occupant or it's a tenant. They live in the place, so they need to know when the contractor's coming in, how long, what they're going to do, and so forth. So we not only communicate with the owners of the units or houses, we need to talk to the tenants as well. And then a contractor's hired. But it's not that simple when I say hire the contractor. So the normal procedure is bids are obtained, and then we go back and forth with the costs. And then when a contractor is selected, we have to review the construction contract. And usually it goes to legal, it goes to an attorney to review, and that may take several months. I've had a situation where it took 1 year to negotiate the contract because it got involved in legal and they kept adding additional items and we went back and forth. So if it's a house, I mean, it's easy. You could do that in probably 30 days, within 30 days. So when the construction contract's ironed out, then there's a construction meeting or a pre-construction meeting called a pre-con meeting, and all these different things are discussed, such as where the contractor is going to park, where they're going to store the materials, what floors they're going to work on, what units they're going to work on, and there's a whole schedule, and it's pretty intense, especially when you're dealing with a high-rise building and involving so many people. Now, um, let me back up and talk about the building permit. Sometimes it takes 12 months, 2 years to get a permit. So uh, it's kind of a long range planning project. It just doesn't happen overnight. Continuing on with the piping replacement protocol, I mentioned hazmat. So let's say we're going into one unit, and here's the start of it. The first people that go in is the demolition crew, and it's the hazmat crew if the place has asbestos containing material. And you cannot just have a plumbing contractor go in and cut open walls and throw away the material if it's asbestos containing, because there's certain laws that govern dealing with asbestos and lead paint. So let's say the hazmat crew goes in, they cuts the wall open and throws away the material. Now, when the hazmat crew goes in, they have to put plastic up, and this is called containment. And then they cut open walls, and then they have to do an air sample test. Once the air sample test comes back and it's negative, meaning that there's no asbestos flying in the air or anything like that, then they take the plastic down. While they're doing the work, no one except them can enter. Okay, so let's say they do the work, they get it all clear. Once they give the all clear, now the general contractor or the plumbing contractor can go in and start removing whatever's in the way of getting to the piping. And this could be countertops, cabinets, a mirror, light fixtures, whatever else is in the way. So they start the demolition. And after they move everything out of the way, then the plumbing contractor goes in and removes the toilet, the shower wall, or whatever else is in the way. And speaking of toilets, if it's an old toilet and it's not a low flow, they have to get rid of the toilet and install a low flow toilet. This is required by the building and plumbing code. Okay, so if you have an old toilet, then you're getting a new low flow toilet, but of course you have to pay for that. Okay, so let's say that um, the shower wall, the toilet's removed, and anything in the way of the piping to get to the piping. Then what's the next step? Okay, the next step is the plumbing contractor removes the old pipes and installs new pipe. Okay, now, before I move on, this is not only happening in one unit. Okay, so let's say it's a townhouse or a condominium high-rise building. When the contractor works in this one unit, he's actually having to work in 3 units at a time. The subject unit, the unit below, and the unit above. And then why? It's because the pipes are all connected together. So you have, let's say, unit 301. When the pipes in 301 have to be removed, it's connected to unit 401 and on the top, and then on the floor it's connected to unit 201. So that's why 3 units are being worked on at the same time. Because once you remove a pipe and it's an old pipe, sections of the older pipe that's not even in the unit you're working in can collapse or disintegrate. Okay, so that's the key to this type of protocol and this type of project. Of course, the water is turned off, so no one can use the water during this time, okay, for obvious reasons, because you're removing sections of the pipe and there's no pipe there anymore. Okay, so let's say the plumbing contractor removes the old pipe, he installs a new pipe. Then what's next? The wall is open, right? So the drywall got to be put back. Countertop cabinets got to be put back. The shower wall got to be replaced. The toilet either put back if it's a low flow or replaced with a low flow. Then any area that had holes in to run the piping, such as the drywall in the ceiling, concrete flooring, has to be restored or replaced, patch. And then the final would be painting and a punch list inspection. So the other thing to be aware of is that anytime you have a pipe penetration in the floor or ceiling in a high-rise building or townhouse, that area where there's a hole in the floor ceiling has to be uh, what we call fire stopped. So there has to be material, fire rated material, that's put around the opening between the pipe and the floor or the ceiling, so that if there was ever a fire, the fire or the smoke couldn't go to the other units in the building. Okay, so very important. If you look at the photo on the left, I took a photo of a pipe that's actually in a project. I think it was a Nightmare on King Street project that I worked in. So take a look. It's actually a 4-inch pipe that was a vertical pipe called a riser, and it wasn't 4 inches anymore. The diameter of the pipe was probably an inch and a half or so. So that's why there's clogs and leaks, because you're not getting the full effect of a brand new pipe. You're not using the 4 inches that was there initially when the building was new, because all that grime and scale buildup is attached to the wall of the piping, and the diameter gets restricted. The photo on the right is of a shower that of a Waikiki hotel that I worked on, and the new piping was put in, and before the wall was closed up, I had to inspect and take a photo. Okay, so let's talk about CIPP, the real facts. Now, what is CIPP? It's actually stands for cured in place piping. Now, this is not pipe replacement idea. This is actually keeping your old pipes and lining it. And if you drove around and you see your streets being dug up and they got these long pieces of equipment, that's what they're doing. They're actually lining the pipe. So instead of digging up the whole road to install new piping, they have they dig up one section of the road, and then they line the pipe as far as they can go, and then the same process is repeated. So there's a word, it's a common term, 2 words called trenchless technology. And when you hear that, that basically means pipe lining. And trenchless is because you don't have to dig the ground and remove the pipe. You can just dig a little area to access the pipe before you line it. So there's a association called NASCO, which means the National Association of Sewer Service Companies. And basically, that's the association that deals with pipe lining. And there's also the plumbing code and other associations that all work together. So that's the key association if there's any questions on pipe lining. The image on the in the middle is before and after photo. So let's take a pipe, and if you look on the left side of that photo, you see all that brown stuff. Okay, that's the clogged pipe, and you look at the right side of that same photo, it's clear, right? So that's the cured in place piping. And if you look at the image on the right, this is a pipe in the ground. It's an old cast iron pipe where it's all clogged and roots and all that. And after they line it, it's looking a lot better and performs a lot better. Okay, so there's different methods to cured in place piping, and let's talk about that. And by the way, it's not a new thing. This cured in place piping was actually invented in Europe in the 1970s, and it was extensively used in Europe. And it kind of got the idea got to America, got to the United States, and we've been using it for the past 20 years or so. And it's used a lot in military and government. So several types of CIPP is commonly known as pipe lining or pipe coating or a hybrid. So the the pipe lining is basically you take the old pipe and you have a smaller diameter pipe that can fit in the old pipe, and it's basically shoving that new pipe into the old pipe, and that's pipe lining. And basically, it's a new pipe that's just inserted in an old pipe, and it works because it's a new pipe. The problem is you can't keep doing that because then the diameter of the pipe gets smaller and smaller. Okay, and it's used a lot on the mainland instead of having to dig up somebody's driveway and entire yard to replace the piping from the house to the street. Okay. There's also another method where they install a liner in outside uh, and outside of the pipe, and then uh, it goes into the old pipe, and then they inflate this balloon. So the outside of that balloon is where your material is. So when they inflate it, then the material gets stuck onto the walls. Of course, before they do that, the pipe has to be clean. And then there's also a pipe coating method where there's like a tiny sprayer, and they insert this wand into the old pipe, and it goes in a 360 circular motion, and it's spraying. It's like spray painting the inside of a pipe, and that's the coating material that they're using. So this the CIPP protocol is there's actually specifications written for that, and it's not the wild wild west. And these are pipes that I took from a lining project that failed because the lining wasn't installed correctly, and there were all kind of problems. So it has to be done correctly. And I don't have any problem per se with the lining material. The problem I see is the way that it's installed, and these plumbing contractors are not following the actual specs. So be sure that they follow the specs, because if they say, yeah, we've done so many buildings before, we know what we're doing, well, that's fine, but what's the specs that you follow? Because there's specific ASTM specs to follow. And the plumbing code and the building code, they don't have too much information about the lining. So we have to refer to the specifications from the association, and also the manufacturers that make the product. But they have specs that they write, but in the field, people don't follow that for the most part. And there's testing that can be done. So how do the contractor, uh, what's the protocol for CIPP? Well, one, you have to inspect and clean the old pipe first. Okay, now the question that you may ask is, what happens if they inspect it and there's a clog, or they try to clean it and they can't clean the old pipe? Okay, well, guess what? You have to replace the pipe, because if you can't line it, you can't. There's a blockage. You can't successfully line the pipe. So let's say best case scenario, the piping is inspected and it's clean and it's ready to go. So the protocol for CIPP is you have to clean the pipe, and it has to be in such a condition where you can line it. Okay, so best case scenario, you inspect the pipe, you clean the pipe, it's ready. Now you line the pipe. Okay, now after you line the pipe, you have to inspect it and you have to test it. And the same thing with brand new cast iron piping that's not lined. Same protocol. You have to inspect it. You don't clean it, but you replace it. And then after you replace it, you have to test it. So on the CIPP protocol that's lined, you have to inspect it and test it. And when the contractor does the inspection, okay, don't just take his word for it. You want the contractor to video camera every single pipe that they line and save the data. So if there's a problem later, you can go back to it and look at the video and say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't look good. Okay, so part of the requirements for a project, a lining project, is in the contract, they're required to inspect, test it, and keep the inspection and testing data that it can be referred to. That's very important because that's your evidence to prove that either it was lined correctly, or if there was a leak, it was not lined correctly. So basically, in a nutshell, that's the cast iron piping project. And I know I went through it pretty fast, but I guess you get the idea of what it entails. So the basic idea is cast iron piping. Do we repair it or do we replace it? Well, it's kind of difficult to repair a damaged pipe. You could, but then other sections of the pipe is still in the same condition or maybe worse. So instead of doing spot repairs, it's better to replace. And that's my opinion from working on these piping projects for many, many years and looking at cast iron piping and the failure of piping. So basically, that's the gist of the webinar. And at this time, look forward to answering whatever questions that may come up. And let me wake Martin up and see if he's still around. Martin, are you there?
Hey, Lance, still here?
Oh, okay, you didn't fall asleep, huh?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I'm glad we have good audience participation here on the webinar, and hopefully people have gone use the Q&A or the chat asking their questions. So at this time, I'll be happy to listen and give some answers to the questions.
Okay, well, Lance, we get a few Q&A questions, so why don't I shoot them to you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the first one here is asked that I live in a condo and my drain piping leaks. The board is making me pay to have repairs done. Shouldn't the association be responsible for the repairs?
Okay, so who is making the person pay for the repairs?
Oh, gosh, it doesn't say, and I don't know, maybe they can chime in with it, but I guess the owner here is being requested to pay for the repairs, yeah, to the.
Oh, okay, okay. So, interesting. So, because it's a condo association, I guess the board is making the owner pay for the repairs. So, let's see.
Okay, well, if that's the
Okay, so
resolution.
the question is, there's problems, needs repair, and the association, the condo association, making the unit owner pay for the repairs. Um, and okay, so interesting. Now, there's a separation between unit owner piping and a common area piping. So the reason why, and I don't know if this is true or not for this particular person's situation, but usually if the unit owner, the way the condominium documents read is that um, if it's a single component in the building that the unit owner is using and it's not shared, so in other words, the pipe, the drain pipe is only used for that particular unit owner, then it becomes a unit owner responsibility. When that pipe goes into a wall or ceiling, and let's say it's shared by another unit, or it it's tapped into the common area drain line that other unit owners are tapped into, then it becomes a common area uh, component. So if it's a common area component, the association should pay. So in this particular example, it may be where it's a unit owner pipe, and that's why the board is requiring the unit owner to pay for it. So let's say it's a bathroom sink, and the drain pipe for that bathroom sink is leaking, and it's leaking before that pipe hits the main building line. That becomes a unit owner, or that is a unit owner responsibility. So in this case, the person who asked the question would be required to pay. So the answer is we don't really know whose pipe it is. So you got to find out whose pipe that is. If it's a unit owner pipe, yes, you need to pay for it. If it's not a unit owner pipe, then it's an association liability. So the answer to the question is, first, you need to find out who owns the pipe and who's responsible, and then that'll give you the answer that you need. Now, if it's a common area pipe and the association is making the unit owner pay for it, then uh, that's an argument that needs to be made. So that's why I always recommend, for condo owners, if you have a leak and your pipe needs to be snaked, or it's clogged, it needs to be snaked. Make sure that the plumber you call writes down what the length of the pipe was, where the blockage was, because without doing that, you can't prove whether the snake actually went into the common area line or not. So if it did, then the blockage was in a common area line. Then you can ask the association to pay the bill because it's the building's common area line and not the unit owner. So that was a long-winded explanation, but sometimes you need to know more facts before the answer's given. So, person who asked the question, if you didn't get the answer you needed, then write back on the Q&A, and then we'll be happy to talk about it some more. So, Martin, did you understand my explanation?
I think so. If not, I'll ask you later.
Okay. We got
Okay.
any other Q&As?
Yeah, there's a couple more here. The next one says, thank you for the very informative seminar. I hope you have the answer to this one. I've heard that plastic pipe is way cheaper than cast iron pipe. How come you do not talk about plastic pipe? And is it true that it is cheaper?
Good question. The reason why I didn't talk about it, because look at the title of the seminar, the webinar. It said cast iron piping, but I'm not trying to weasel out of that. So in answer to your question, uh, yes, plastic piping is cheaper if you go to the hardware store or go to the home improvement store and buy a section of plastic pipe versus a section of cast iron pipe is cheaper. But there's caveats, and let me explain to you. If you're dealing with a high-rise condo or a let's say a townhouse, which is 2 stories and above, and the building, it doesn't matter whether it's a townhouse or a condo, if the building has original cast iron piping, you do not want to replace it with plastic piping. And here's the reason why. First, there's a noise factor. Cast iron piping, because it's thicker metal, it's more insulated than plastic. And if someone flushes their toilet and you replace cast iron with plastic, you're going to hear that water flow. And it's no fun at 2 in the morning to hear people flushing their toilet because of plastic piping. The other thing is there's only certain uh, types of plastic piping that can be used in a high-rise building because of the fire. So there's basically 2 main types of plastic piping. There's ABS, which is black pipe, and there's PVC, which is white pipe. And I'm just saying that's the color of the pipe. Um, ABS, for fire rating, it burns faster than PVC, and that's why ABS is not rated for high-rise buildings. And PVC can be used, but because PVC is plastic, in case of a fire, it's going to also burn. And so the reason for the cost factors, although PVC is cheaper, when you install PVC and it goes through the floor penetrations, floors and ceiling penetration, you know that hole there that I talked about where in the cast iron you have to fire stop it with fire rated material? You have to do the same thing with the PVC, but now you have to install this intumescent ring around that hole there. And what happens is when there's a fire, the material expands and plugs up the hole. And that ring is very expensive. So if you add up all the rings you need, although the PVC piping is cheaper, the total cost may be equivalent to cast iron because there's additional labor for that and high cost of the material. So in the long run, the PVC may save you a few bucks, but uh, you don't want to risk the issue where you have a noise problem. Because if there wasn't a noise before and now there is, then it's a problem. I know of a building who replaced their cast iron with PVC, plastic piping, and there was a noise issue, and unit owners complained, and they had to go and spend more money to replace the new PVC with cast iron because they, I guess, weren't aware of that noise issue. So it is cheaper on a single family house. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to use cast iron. You can go with PVC or ABS, a plastic pipe. So there's a difference. So just ask your plumbing contractor. It's easier to replace piping on a single family house or a duplex than it is a high-rise building, right? It's pretty obvious. So yeah, good question. Thank you for asking.
Okay, Lance, I get maybe one more here. My building is having the pipes replaced. Can I ask the contractor to remove my old tub and replace it with a walk-in shower? And what is the cost for a new shower?
Okay, well, we're kind of into that situation where the contractor who's hired, and let's say we're talking about a high-rise building, or it could be a low-rise building, but we're talking about multiple units rather than a single-family house. the contractor that's hired for the plumbing job, he's hired to stay on schedule and do whatever his scope of work is, which is replacing the old cast iron piping with new cast iron piping. He's not there to remodel people's units. Okay, so the answer is yes, you can ask him, but I can tell you that his answer is going to be no, especially on projects that I work on. The projects that I work on, every unit owner is notified in advance that if you want to do that, the ideal situation is for a remodel is we're going to cut open the walls. We're going to, I mean, if you want to convert your tub into a shower, we'll remove your tub, we'll replace your cast iron piping and leave it like that. We won't close up the wall. And then you bring in your own contractor to go do your shower repair and all that. Now, uh, we're not trying to be mean or anything, but if the plumbing contractor has another division where they do remodels, then you may ask them if they can help you with that. But normally, the contractor's there to do his one job, so he's not there to go. Because can you imagine? There's a schedule that they have to meet, and if they spend an extra 2 weeks working on that one unit, now they're 6 units behind on a whole global scale of doing the entire project. So that's normally what happens. Now, as far as the cost, it's kind of hard to say. Normally, on a bathtub shower remodel, you may be looking at $15,000 to $50,000. Depends on what you want, how big your shower is, and all that. But for the most part, let's say an average size shower, a tub shower, usually, and then you pick, not high end material. You don't want luxury granite or marble walls, and certain uh, custom design and all that, and high end mirrored glass for shower sliding doors and all that. Normally, the range would be about $20,000 to $25,000 or something like that. Depends what kind of features you want. Sometimes people like a big shower and they have a nice bench for them to sit on, or they have a nice soap dish and elaborate plumbing fixtures with a ceiling sprayer and all that. So I mean that's just a ballpark figure, 25,000. I think for that amount you could get a nice, decent, upgraded walk-in shower that would look good. But make sure that when they do that, they fix the drain. The drain is key because the floor can't be exactly flat. It has to be sloped to the drain. I've inspected many new showers where it was a tub shower conversion, and they didn't want to move the drain, so they left it and they didn't slope the back wall. And when you turn the shower on, the water just ends up sitting on the back side and it never drains to the drain because there was no slope. So that would be a defect in the construction. So hopefully that answers your question. If you have any idea and you want to, convert, and you don't know what materials, go to like a hardware store, City Mill, Home Depot, Lowe's, and go look at all the different kind of fixtures they have for plumbing and the type of tile you want for your walls and that kind of thing. So, Martin, did that answer the question?
Sounds like a good answer to me. Thank you,
Okay.
Lance. I just got one last one. Hopefully you get time for.
Yeah, go ahead.
In your talk, you said something about hazmat work. If the old drywall is going to be cut and thrown away anyway, how come the plumber can't do this work? Why do you need another contractor to do the work when the plumber is there already? Yeah, maybe you answered this, but go for
Uh,
it.
No, that's a good question. I mean, people want to save money, right? But the fact of the matter is, if you're dealing with any kind of hazardous materials, and that's what hazmat means for short, you were talking about lead paint, asbestos, and maybe if the pipe's leaking, maybe there's mold in the wall and all that. You need, and this is by law, we're not making things up to give the contractor more work. And have you expend more dollars. We're following the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Health regulations and that govern hazmat material. And there's a specific license that you need. So not any plumber or general contractor can go and cut open walls that have asbestos in it. You have to have a license abatement contractor to do that work. And that's actually uh, state and federal law. So that's a mandate. So although it's more expensive, we have to follow the regulations. Now, if the regulations aren't followed, there could be fines up to like $25,000 a day. So it's pretty hefty. So can you imagine you're remodeling your shower and the uh, contractors charging you $20,000 for a brand new shower. He's taking a tub out and he's putting a walk-in, brand new walk-in shower, and he's charging you $22,000. And he says, "Oh, yeah, no worry, I'll just cut the wall myself to save money." And then he gets fined $25,000. Guess what? He never made money in the job. In fact, he has to pay money and still give you a new shower. So don't let any contractor tell you that they can do the work. Now, if they're a general contractor, they can sub it out to a hazmat contractor, but uh, we have to follow the regulations. And we don't want hazards because if they go in and start cutting the wall, now they're exposing asbestos flying all over the place into your house. So, interesting question. Martin, any other Q&A?
No, that's all that we received. Yeah.
Okay, I got an email prior to the webinar, and hopefully the person is still on the webinar that asked this question. And the question is, uh, I live in a condo and found out that we need to do our piping project, and the cost is $6 million. Of course, the association doesn't have that kind of money. The question is, wouldn't it be cheaper to phase it rather than doing uh, all the plumbing at once? And the answer is, it may sound like it's cheaper by doing, maybe 10 or 20% of the building one year and then doing uh, the other 20 the next year and spread it out for multiple years. Okay, in the long run, it's not saving you money. It's not even saving you money in the short run. And here's the reason why: the cost increases for labor and material every year. And every time the contractor got to go back to your building, let's say they do like uh, 20 units at one time, and then that's all the money you guys have, and then they got to come back next year to do 20 more. Okay. The following year, guess what? The labor costs and the material cost is going to be expensive. And then, I mean, it's going to be higher by whatever the percentages for inflation and their labor costs and material costs. Material costs may go up 15%. Who knows? Okay. And then there's actually their mobilization fee. So initially, when they go to the site to do the first unit, they're already bringing in the materials, their trucks, their storage, and all that. After they do the first set of units, the first phase, now they got to demobilize. They got to take everything back. Okay. And then when they come back the following year, they got to do the same thing, haul all their trucks, equipment, and all that, their materials. And every time they do that, there's a mobilization fee, and that may be 20% of the cost. See? So each time they do that, it just gets higher and higher, more expensive. So at the end of the project, when you add all that up, guess what? It's going to cost more than the 6 million had you guys done it in the first place. Okay. The other consideration would be, let's say if you spread the project out 5 or 6 years, what happens with the people who live in the units that are in years 3, 4, and 5, and they have leaks that you guys decided, the board decided not to fix because of money? Couldn't those guys get irritated, and if their unit got damaged, they could actually sue the board and say, you know what, you guys waited too long? So that's another consideration. And there actually been lawsuits regarding the boards of condos not doing their duty and getting their property fixed. There have been lawsuits regarding pipe leaks, lawsuits regarding electrical, roof leaks, and windows and different things like that. So um, it might not pay to do phasing, especially on a huge property. It makes sense to bite the bullet and just pay the money up front or special assessment to get it done at one time. So that wraps up the webinar. Hopefully everybody got some good information from it. By the way, before we go, I'd like to invite you to the next webinar about air conditioning, fresh air facts. And then after that, in the month of May, we have 2 more webinars on railing. And Marta, do you know what the topics are?
I'm sorry, what was that, Lance? I didn't get that.
Do you remember what the topics are for the next webinars in May? I think it was railing or something.
Railings and roofing.
Oh, okay. So railings is very, very important, especially for condo buildings, townhouses. And then roofing applies to anybody, whether you're in a commercial, a condo, or whether it's your own house. That's going to be another important webinar. So hopefully you stick with us on the Ask the Building Expert series. And we really value your attendance, and spread the word, let other people know, and we'll hopefully see you next time. Thank you. Aloha.